Captain Elena Rodriguez had always seen patterns where others saw chaos. While her fellow officers at Camp Liberty focused on standard tactical manuals and conventional wisdom, she analyzed enemy movement data with the precision of a chess grandmaster studying her opponent's next 10 moves. What they dismissed as overthinking, she knew was survival.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The desert heat shimmered off the concrete of Camp Liberty's main compound as Captain Elena Rodriguez made her way to the morning briefing. 6 months into her deployment as intelligence analyst for the 3rd Armored Division, she had established a routine that began before dawn and ended well after most officers had retired to their quarters. The base, situated in the volatile Anbar region, had become her laboratory for understanding enemy tactics in ways that traditional intelligence gathering had failed to achieve. Elena's background set her apart from the typical intelligence officer. While most of her peers had followed conventional military intelligence paths, she held advanced degrees in applied mathematics and behavioral psychology from Stanford University. Her thesis on predictive modeling in asymmetric warfare had earned academic recognition but little practical application until she volunteered for deployment. The combination of theoretical knowledge and field experience had created a unique analytical approach that consistently produced insights others missed. Elena's background set her apart from the typical intelligence officer. While most of her peers had followed conventional military intelligence paths, she held advanced degrees in applied mathematics and behavioral psychology from Stanford University. Her thesis on predictive modeling in asymmetric warfare had earned academic recognition but little practical application until she volunteered for deployment. The combination of theoretical knowledge and field experience had created a unique analytical approach that consistently produced insights others missed. Colonel Marcus Thompson, the division commander, had initially welcomed her expertise. A career infantry officer with 3 previous deployments, Thompson understood the value of superior intelligence in counterinsurgency operations. Elena's assignment to his staff had been personally requested after reviewing her academic work and training records. However, the honeymoon period was brief. The first signs of friction appeared during week 3 of her deployment. Elena had been analyzing insurgent attack patterns across the region, cross-referencing timing, location, target selection, and tactical execution. Her mathematical models revealed cyclical patterns that suggested operational planning far more sophisticated than the random terrorist activities described in official assessments. When she presented her preliminary findings during a staff meeting, the reception was lukewarm at best. Captain Rodriguez, Major David Hawkins, the operations officer, had interrupted during her presentation. "These statistical models are interesting academic exercises, but we're dealing with unpredictable terrorist cells, not rational military forces. You can't predict chaos with spreadsheets." The comment drew chuckles from several officers around the table. Elena had maintained her professional composure, but the dismissal stung. More importantly, it revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of her work that would prove increasingly problematic. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the executive officer, had been more diplomatic but equally skeptical. "Captain, your analysis assumes a level of coordination and planning that our intelligence sources don't support. These groups operate independently, react to opportunities, and lack the organizational structure your models require." The criticism was thoughtful but reflected the same underlying assumption that insurgent operations were inherently chaotic and therefore unpredictable. Elena's response had been measured and professional. "Ma'am, I respectfully disagree. Chaos and randomness are not the same thing. Even seemingly random events can follow discernible patterns when analyzed with sufficient data and appropriate methodologies. The insurgents may not operate with formal military precision, but they demonstrate consistent behavioral patterns that can be quantified and predicted." The exchange established a dynamic that would define Elena's experience over the following months. Her analytical approach clashed with the intuitive, experience-based decision-making that dominated military culture. While her fellow officers relied on gut instincts honed through years of combat experience, Elena sought to quantify and predict enemy behavior through mathematical analysis and psychological profiling. The theoretical divide became a practical conflict when Elena's models began predicting enemy activities with uncomfortable accuracy. Her first successful prediction came during Week 5. Analysis of attack timing, target selection, and tactical patterns suggested insurgents would attempt a complex ambush on Highway 7 between 800 and 1000 hours on a Tuesday morning. The prediction was specific enough to be actionable, but sufficiently unprecedented to generate skepticism. Major Hawkins had been openly dismissive during the briefing where Elena presented her findings. "Captain, you're asking us to reroute an entire supply convoy based on mathematical probability. We make tactical decisions based on intelligence reports, not academic theories." His tone carried the condescension of a combat veteran addressing a theoretical academic. Colonel Thompson, however, had been intrigued despite his reservations. "Captain Rodriguez, explain your confidence level in this prediction." Elena had walked through her methodology step by step, demonstrating how previous attack data revealed patterns in insurgent planning cycles, target preferences, and tactical execution. Her mathematical models suggested a 73% probability of attack on the specified date and location. The decision to alter convoy routes based on Elena's prediction had been controversial within the command structure. Several officers argued that changing established procedures based on unproven analytical methods set a dangerous precedent. Others worried about the implications of elevating theoretical analysis above traditional intelligence gathering and field experience. When the convoy traveled the alternate route without incident, skeptics initially dismissed Elena's success as coincidence. However, intelligence reports confirmed that insurgents had indeed positioned forces for an ambush on Highway 7 at precisely the time and location Elena had predicted. The enemy had waited for over 2 hours before abandoning their positions, suggesting a well-planned operation that had been successfully disrupted. Rather than vindication, Elena's success generated new problems. Officers who had been merely skeptical became actively hostile to her methods. The implication that mathematical analysis could outperform their combat experience and tactical instincts was professionally threatening. Elena found herself increasingly isolated within the command structure, her insights dismissed as lucky guesses rather than analytical breakthroughs. Major Hawkins led the opposition to Elena's methods, arguing that relying on predictive models would make operations predictable to enemy forces. "If we start following mathematical formulas instead of adapting to battlefield conditions, we become vulnerable to counter-prediction," he argued during staff meetings. His concerns reflected broader anxiety about the role of technology and analytical methods in military decision-making. The resistance to Elena's work was not merely intellectual, but deeply cultural. The military prized decisive leadership based on experience and intuition. Officers who had earned respect through combat performance viewed mathematical prediction as a threat to the warrior ethos that defined their professional identity. Elena's success undermined the narrative that battlefield effectiveness required years of combat experience and instinctive tactical understanding. Despite growing opposition, Elena continued refining her analytical methods. She expanded her data collection to include weather patterns, local economic indicators, religious and cultural events, and even social media activity. Her models became increasingly sophisticated, incorporating multiple variables that traditional intelligence analysis overlooked. The complexity of her work, however, made it even less accessible to officers who preferred straightforward tactical assessments. Colonel Thompson found himself caught between Elena's proven results and the growing resistance from his staff. While her predictions had been accurate, the controversy surrounding her methods was becoming disruptive to unit cohesion. Thompson valued innovation, but also understood the importance of maintaining command unity and officer confidence. The situation reached a tipping point during Elena's 8th week of deployment. Her analysis predicted a major coordinated attack involving multiple insurgent cells targeting coalition forces across 3 separate locations. The scope and complexity of her prediction exceeded anything she had previously attempted, requiring resources and coordination that would test the command's faith in her methods. The prediction called for simultaneous attacks on a supply depot, a checkpoint, and a patrol base, coordinated to achieve maximum impact while limiting coalition response capabilities. The briefing where Elena presented these findings was tense and contentious. Officers questioned every aspect of her methodology, challenging her data sources, mathematical assumptions, and underlying premise that insurgent operations could be predicted with such precision. The stakes were higher than previous predictions, requiring significant resource allocation and operational changes purely on analytical assessment.
Major Hawkins was particularly aggressive in his questioning. Captain Rodriguez, you're asking us to redeploy significant forces based on a mathematical model that assumes insurgents operate like computer programs. These are human beings making tactical decisions based on constantly changing conditions. Your models can't account for the human element that drives real battlefield dynamics. Elena's response revealed the depth of her analytical work and the sophistication of her understanding. Sir, human behavior is not random. People make decisions based on psychological patterns, cultural influences, and rational calculations within their own framework of understanding. My models don't treat insurgents as computer programs. They treat them as human beings whose decision-making processes can be analyzed and predicted when sufficient data is available. The exchange highlighted the fundamental philosophical divide between Elena's analytical approach and the traditional military emphasis on human intuition and experience. Her success had made the debate unavoidable, forcing the command to confront questions about the role of mathematical analysis in tactical decision-making and the limits of traditional military thinking in modern asymmetric warfare. As Elena left the briefing room that day, she sensed that her most significant test was approaching. The prediction she had made would either validate her methods conclusively or provide ammunition for those seeking to discredit her work entirely. Either way, the quiet intelligence officer who saw patterns where others saw chaos was about to discover whether mathematical precision could overcome institutional resistance and professional jealousy in the ultimate laboratory of combat operations. The morning of Elena's predicted coordinated attack dawned clear and hot, with visibility extending across the desert landscape for miles. At 0530 hours, Colonel Thompson stood in the Tactical Operations Center reviewing the defensive preparations implemented based on Elena's analysis. 3 separate locations had been reinforced with additional personnel and equipment, communication protocols had been adjusted to enable rapid response coordination, and reserve forces had been positioned to provide flexible support. The atmosphere in the talk was electric with tension. Officers who had opposed Elena's predictions now found themselves implementing tactical adjustments based on her mathematical models. The cognitive dissonance was palpable as experienced combat veterans preparing for battle based on spreadsheet analysis rather than traditional intelligence indicators. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, the senior intelligence analyst who had worked closely with Elena, monitored communication intercepts from her workstation. Elena had incorporated signals intelligence patterns into her predictive models, identifying subtle changes in insurgent communication behavior that preceded major operations. Santos had initially been skeptical of Elena's mathematical approach, but had gradually become convinced by the accuracy of her predictions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Captain Rodriguez, Santos called across the operations center, we're seeing the communication pattern shifts you predicted. Radio silence in sectors 7 and 12, increased courier activity between safe houses, and the cellular network anomalies you flagged yesterday. Elena nodded, checking her chronometer against the timeline her models had generated. The human intelligence indicators were aligning with mathematical predictions with disturbing precision. Major Hawkins stood near the main tactical display, his expression a mixture of professional anxiety and personal frustration. The previous week had been particularly difficult, as Elena's models had correctly predicted 3 separate small-scale attacks that traditional intelligence had missed entirely. Each success had undermined his credibility while elevating Elena's reputation among junior officers who had begun consulting her analysis independently. "This is ridiculous," Hawkins muttered to Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell. "We're running operations based on a computer program designed by someone who's never been in actual combat. When this prediction fails, I want her removed from intelligence duties immediately." Mitchell's response was diplomatically noncommittal, but her expression suggested shared concerns about the precedent being established. At 0647 hours, the first indication that Elena's prediction might be accurate came from Outpost Delta 7, the supply depot identified in her analysis. Corporal James Wilson, manning the perimeter observation post, reported unusual civilian vehicle movement in patterns that matched Elena's behavioral models for pre-attack reconnaissance. TOC, Delta 7, we've got multiple civilian vehicles conducting what appears to be surveillance runs. Third pass in 20 minutes, different vehicles each time, all maintaining identical observation distances. The report sent a ripple of increased alertness through the operations center. Elena consulted her predictive timeline, noting that reconnaissance activity was occurring exactly within the window her models had calculated. The insurgents were following behavioral patterns so consistent with her mathematical analysis that she felt a mixture of vindication and growing dread about what was approaching. Captain Michael Foster, commanding officer of the patrol base identified as the third target, checked in with equally concerning intelligence. TOC, Bravo 6, we've observed significant changes in local civilian behavior over the past 12 hours. Market activity has ceased, children are absent from normal play areas, and we've noted unusual concentrations of military-age males in surrounding neighborhoods. These social indicators had been incorporated into Elena's models based on her psychological analysis of insurgent operations. She had identified patterns in civilian behavior that preceded attacks, recognizing that local populations often received advance warning that could be detected through systematic observation. At 0723 hours, exactly 17 minutes before Elena's predicted attack window, the checkpoint designated as Target 2 reported direct confirmation of insurgent presence. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen, commanding the roadblock security detail, observed armed individuals positioning themselves in buildings previously identified by Elena's terrain analysis models. Contact front, Chen reported with professional calm, multiple armed individuals occupying elevated positions consistent with ambush preparations, requesting immediate backup and indirect fire support. The report galvanized the operations center as Elena's prediction transitioned from theoretical possibility to tactical reality. Colonel Thompson moved to the communication console, coordinating response efforts across all three threatened locations simultaneously. The defensive preparations based on Elena's analysis allowed for rapid reaction that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. Reserve forces were already positioned, communication protocols were established, and support assets were prepared for immediate deployment. Major Hawkins found himself in the uncomfortable position of coordinating tactical responses based on predictions he had vehemently opposed. His professional competence required him to execute the defensive plan effectively regardless of his personal reservations about its foundation. The irony was not lost on other officers in the TOC who had witnessed his resistance to Elena's methods. The first actual attack commenced at 0741 hours when insurgents initiated a complex assault on the supply depot using tactics that matched Elena's predictions with frightening accuracy. The attackers employed a three-phase approach: initial probing fire to assess defensive response, coordinated indirect fire to suppress movement, followed by direct assault on predetermined weak points. Sergeant Santos monitored the tactical reports with growing amazement at how closely the insurgent actions matched Elena's mathematical models. "Captain Rodriguez, they're following your predicted assault pattern almost exactly. Timing, approach routes, even the sequence of weapons employment matches your analysis." Elena felt no satisfaction in being proven correct. Each confirmed prediction meant that American forces were facing precisely the coordinated threat she had identified through mathematical analysis. Her models had been designed to prevent casualties, not to prove theoretical points about predictive accuracy. The checkpoint came under attack at 0756 hours, exactly 15 minutes after the supply depot assault began, matching Elena's coordination timeline perfectly. The insurgents demonstrated tactical sophistication that contradicted intelligence assessments describing them as disorganized guerrilla fighters. Their ability to coordinate multiple simultaneous operations suggested command and control capabilities that traditional intelligence had failed to identify. Staff Sergeant Chen's defensive preparations, implemented based on Elena's terrain analysis and attack vector predictions, proved decisive in repelling the assault. Pre-positioned obstacles channeled insurgent movement into predetermined kill zones, while concealed observation posts provided overlapping fields of fire that eliminated the element of surprise insurgents had relied upon in previous operations. The patrol base attack materialized at 0808 hours, completing the coordinated assault exactly as Elena's models had predicted. Captain Foster's enhanced defensive posture, including additional personnel and equipment positioned according to Elena's tactical analysis, enabled effective response to what would otherwise have been a devastating surprise attack. Throughout the engagement, Elena monitored tactical reports while updating her models with real-time data. The insurgents' tactical execution provided validation for her analytical methods, while simultaneously generating new data points for future predictions. She was literally watching her mathematical theories play out in life-and-death combat operations. By 09:30 hours, all three attacks had been repelled with minimal coalition casualties and significant insurgent losses. The coordinated assault that should have achieved strategic surprise and maximum damage had instead encountered prepared defenses that neutralized most tactical advantages. Elena's predictions had not only been accurate, but had enabled defensive preparations that saved lives and preserved combat effectiveness. The aftermath of the successful defense created an uncomfortable dynamic within the command structure. Elena's critics could no longer dismiss her methods as academic theories disconnected from battlefield reality. Her mathematical models had demonstrated predictive accuracy that exceeded traditional intelligence assessment by orders of magnitude. However, rather than embracing Elena's capabilities, many officers felt threatened by implications that mathematical analysis could replace experience-based tactical decision-making. The success of her predictions raised fundamental questions about military education, professional development, and the role of analytical thinking in combat operations. Colonel Thompson faced the challenge of integrating Elena's proven capabilities into existing command structures while managing the resistance from officers who viewed her success as a professional threat. The mathematical precision of her predictions had saved lives and prevented mission failure, but it had also disrupted traditional hierarchies and challenged conventional military thinking. Colonel Thompson faced the challenge of integrating Elena's proven capabilities into existing command structures while managing the resistance from officers who viewed her success as a professional threat. The mathematical precision of her predictions had saved lives and prevented mission failure, but it had also disrupted traditional hierarchies and challenged conventional military thinking. Colonel Thompson faced the challenge of integrating Elena's proven capabilities into existing command structures while managing the resistance from officers who viewed her success as a professional threat. The mathematical precision of her predictions had saved lives and prevented mission failure, but it had also disrupted traditional hierarchies and challenged conventional military thinking. As Elena compiled her post-action analysis, she recognized that her greatest challenge might not be predicting enemy actions, but overcoming institutional resistance to methods that challenged decades of military tradition and professional identity. The coordinated attack had been defeated, but the battle for acceptance of analytical prediction was just beginning. 3 weeks after the coordinated attack, Elena discovered that her success had made her a target within her own command structure. The discovery came through an inadvertent conversation she overheard while retrieving classified materials from the secure filing room adjacent to Major Hawkins' office. What she heard would fundamentally alter her understanding of the challenges she faced. "The Rodriguez situation has become untenable," Hawkins was saying to someone Elena couldn't identify. "Her methods are undermining command authority and creating unrealistic expectations among junior officers. Soldiers are starting to question tactical decisions that don't align with her mathematical predictions." Elena pressed herself against the filing cabinet, recognizing that she was witnessing something that could define her future.
The conversation continued with calculated precision that revealed a coordinated effort to eliminate her influence within the division. Captain Rodriguez has created a cult of personality around her analytical methods, continued an unfamiliar voice that Elena eventually identified as Lieutenant Colonel Bradley Hayes from Division Headquarters. Junior officers bypass established intelligence channels to consult her directly. NCOs question orders that contradict her predictions. This represents a fundamental breakdown in military discipline and chain of command. The accusation was serious and largely fabricated. While Elena had indeed gained respect among some personnel for her accurate predictions, she had never encouraged anyone to bypass official channels or question legitimate orders. Her work had always been conducted through proper command structures, with all analysis provided to designated intelligence officers for integration into official assessments. Major Hawkins' response revealed the true nature of his concerns. Her success makes experienced officers look incompetent by comparison. Combat veterans with multiple deployments are being questioned by soldiers who think mathematical models are more reliable than tactical experience. This undermines the entire foundation of military leadership. Elena realized she was witnessing a conversation about professional survival rather than operational effectiveness. Her analytical methods had achieved undeniable success in predicting enemy actions and preventing casualties, but that success threatened the professional identity and career prospects of officers whose authority rested on experience-based decision-making. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes outlined a systematic approach to discrediting Elena's work. We need to demonstrate that her methods are unreliable under real combat conditions. Mathematical models work until they don't, and when they fail catastrophically, it will prove that traditional military judgment remains superior to academic theories.
The plan they discussed involved deliberately withholding certain intelligence data from Elena's analysis while creating scenarios where her predictions would be tested under incomplete information. By degrading the quality of data available for her mathematical models, they intended to engineer failures that would justify removing her from intelligence duties. Elena continued listening as they detailed specific steps to isolate her within the command structure. Key personnel would be instructed to limit their cooperation with her data collection efforts. Intelligence reports would be delayed or modified before reaching her analysis. Senior NCOs would be briefed about concerns regarding her methods and encouraged to report any instances of junior personnel questioning orders based on her predictions. The conversation revealed that Elena's persecution was not the result of professional disagreement, but a calculated campaign designed to protect the careers and authority of officers who felt threatened by her success. Her mathematical approach to tactical prediction had achieved results that traditional intelligence methods could not match, creating an existential challenge to established military hierarchy. Major Hawkins articulated the central concern with brutal honesty. If word reaches higher command that a captain with mathematical models can predict enemy actions better than experienced field commanders, it calls into question the entire promotion system. Why promote officers based on combat experience if analytical skills prove more valuable than tactical intuition? Elena felt a chill of recognition as she understood the full scope of what she faced. This was not about the effectiveness of her methods or their contribution to mission success. This was about protecting an institutional structure that valued traditional military virtues over analytical innovation, even when that innovation saved lives and achieved tactical superiority. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes concluded the meeting with instructions that would systematically undermine Elena's work. Implement these changes gradually to avoid suspicion. Make her failures appear natural rather than engineered. When her predictions start proving incorrect, we can justify reassigning her to duties more appropriate for someone with her limited combat experience. As the conversation ended and footsteps approached the filing room, Elena quietly exited through an alternate door, her mind racing with implications of what she had overheard. The officers planning her professional destruction were the same individuals responsible for protecting the soldiers under their command.
Their willingness to compromise operational effectiveness to preserve their own authority represented a fundamental corruption of military leadership principles. Elena returned to her workspace with a new understanding of her situation. Her analytical methods had proven their value through accurate predictions and successful defensive operations, but institutional resistance had evolved into active sabotage. She faced the challenge of maintaining operational effectiveness while being systematically denied the resources necessary for her mathematical models to function properly. The first manifestation of the campaign against her appeared 2 days later when Sergeant Santos informed Elena that her access to certain intelligence databases had been restricted. The limitation was explained as a security review, but Elena recognized it as the beginning of the systematic degradation Hawkins and Hayes had planned. "Captain Rodriguez, I'm sorry about this," Santos said, her expression reflecting genuine concern. "The restriction came down from division level with no explanation beyond administrative requirements. Half the data sources you use for your predictive models are now off limits." Elena studied the list of restricted databases, recognizing that the selection was not random. The eliminated sources included communication intercepts, economic intelligence, and social analysis reports that provided crucial input for her mathematical models. Without access to comprehensive data, her predictions would become less accurate, providing ammunition for critics who argued that her methods were unreliable. The restrictions created a professional dilemma that Elena had not anticipated. She could either accept the limitations and watch her predictive accuracy decline, providing justification for her critics, or she could attempt to maintain access through irregular channels, potentially violating regulations and providing different grounds for disciplinary action. Captain Jessica Palmer, a fellow intelligence officer who had initially been skeptical of Elena's methods, approached her privately that afternoon. Palmer had gradually become convinced of the value of mathematical prediction after witnessing Elena's success in preventing casualties and achieving tactical advantages. "Elena, something's not right about these access restrictions," Palmer said, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "The databases they've blocked are exactly the ones you need for your analytical work. This feels targeted rather than administrative." Elena appreciated Palmer's support, but recognized that involving other officers in her situation could jeopardize their careers as well. The campaign against her was being conducted by senior officers with the authority to damage anyone who opposed their efforts. "I understand your concern, Jessica, but I need to handle this situation carefully. The restrictions might be temporary, and I don't want to create problems for other people by assuming malicious intent." Palmer's expression suggested she wasn't convinced by Elena's diplomatic response. "Elena, your predictive work has saved lives and prevented mission failures. If someone is deliberately undermining your capabilities, they're putting soldiers at risk for personal or political reasons. That's not something any officer should tolerate quietly."
The conversation highlighted the broader implications of the campaign against Elena. Her mathematical models had become integrated into defensive planning and tactical decision-making across multiple units within the division. Degrading her analytical capabilities would reduce the effectiveness of these operations and potentially result in casualties that could have been prevented. Elena spent the evening developing workarounds for the database restrictions, identifying alternative sources of information that could maintain the accuracy of her predictive models. The process was time-consuming and technically challenging, but her mathematical background provided tools for extracting meaningful patterns from limited datasets. However, she recognized that the restrictions were only the beginning of a systematic effort to discredit her work. Major Hawkins and Lieutenant Colonel Hayes had demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how to undermine her capabilities while maintaining plausible deniability about their motivations. As Elena worked late into the night, developing new analytical approaches to compensate for the restricted data access, she realized that her greatest challenge was no longer predicting enemy actions, but surviving the institutional warfare being conducted against her by her own command structure. The mathematical precision that had made her invaluable as a tactical analyst was about to be tested against the human dynamics of professional jealousy, institutional resistance, and the willingness of some officers to sacrifice operational effectiveness to preserve their own authority. Elena's next predictions would be generated under artificial constraints designed to ensure their failure, testing whether mathematical models could overcome deliberate sabotage by the very people they were designed to protect. 2 weeks into the database restrictions, Elena faced her first prediction failure under the degraded intelligence environment. The failure was precisely what Major Hawkins and Lieutenant Colonel Hayes had orchestrated, but its consequences extended far beyond Elena's professional reputation to the safety of soldiers who depended on accurate threat assessment. The incident began when Elena's modified analytical models, operating with artificially limited data, predicted a 68% probability of insurgent activity targeting a water treatment facility on the base's eastern perimeter. Without access to communication intercepts and social pattern analysis, her mathematical models had produced a prediction with lower confidence than her previous work, but still within actionable parameters. Colonel Thompson, increasingly frustrated by the controversy surrounding Elena's methods, authorized minimal defensive adjustments based on her prediction. The reduced confidence level provided justification for treating her analysis as supplementary rather than primary intelligence, a decision that would prove costly when the actual attack materialized at a completely different location. At 03:47 hours, insurgents struck the base's main communications array on the western perimeter, achieving complete tactical surprise and causing significant damage before withdrawing. The attack employed sophisticated electronic warfare techniques that disrupted coalition communications for over 6 hours, compromising operations across the entire sector. Major Hawkins wasted no time exploiting Elena's failed prediction during the post-incident briefing. This catastrophic intelligence failure demonstrates the dangers of relying on mathematical models instead of proven military intelligence methods, he declared, his tone carrying the satisfaction of vindication he had been seeking for months. Elena sat silently as Hawkins systematically dismantled her credibility before the assembled command staff. She recognized that defending her methods would require revealing her knowledge of the deliberate intelligence restrictions, potentially escalating the situation into formal accusations that could destroy multiple careers. Captain Rodriguez's prediction was not only incorrect but dangerously misleading, Hawkins continued. Resources were allocated to defend against a non-existent threat while our actual vulnerability remained unprotected. This represents exactly the kind of analytical failure we should expect when academic theories replace battlefield experience. Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, who had gradually become supportive of Elena's work after witnessing her previous successes, appeared genuinely confused by the prediction failure. "Captain Rodriguez, can you explain how your models could have been so completely wrong? Your previous predictions have been remarkably accurate." Elena faced an impossible choice between revealing the systematic sabotage of her intelligence access and accepting responsibility for a failure that had been deliberately engineered. Her commitment to maintaining professional dignity and avoiding escalation led her to accept blame she didn't deserve. "Ma'am, my analytical models are only as accurate as the data they process," Elena replied carefully. "Recent changes in intelligence access may have affected the comprehensiveness of my analysis. I take full responsibility for not adequately adjusting my confidence assessments to reflect these limitations." Her response was professional and technically accurate, but it failed to convey the deliberate nature of the intelligence restrictions that had compromised her work. Colonel Thompson interpreted her statement as acknowledgement that her methods were inherently unreliable, rather than evidence of institutional sabotage. "Captain Rodriguez, this failure raises serious questions about the viability of mathematical prediction in dynamic combat environments," Thompson said, his disappointment evident. "I'm suspending your predictive analysis duties pending a comprehensive review of your methodologies and their integration into our intelligence framework." The suspension represented exactly what Hawkins and Hayes had sought to achieve. Elena's proven capabilities were being eliminated based on a single failure that had been deliberately engineered through systematic degradation of her analytical resources.
The institutional protection of traditional military hierarchy had succeeded in neutralizing an innovation that threatened established power structures. Sergeant Santos approached Elena after the briefing, her expression reflecting anger and frustration at the obvious injustice. "Captain Rodriguez, this is wrong. Everyone knows your predictions have saved lives and prevented casualties. One failure doesn't erase months of success." Elena appreciated Santos's loyalty but recognized that public support from enlisted personnel could be interpreted as evidence of the disciplinary problems Hawkins had alleged. "Sergeant, I understand your concerns, but command decisions are made based on operational requirements that extend beyond individual preferences." The diplomatic response masked Elena's growing understanding that she was fighting not just for her professional survival, but for the principle that institutional innovation should be evaluated based on objective effectiveness rather than subjective threats to traditional authority. Captain Palmer found Elena later that evening in the Intelligence Analysis Center, reviewing data to understand how the communications array attack had been planned and executed without detection by traditional intelligence methods. Palmer's investigation had revealed disturbing patterns in how Elena's intelligence access had been restricted. "Elena, I've been asking questions about your database restrictions," Palmer said quietly. "The limitations weren't applied uniformly across intelligence personnel. You're the only analyst who lost access to those specific sources, and the restriction came directly from Major Hawkins rather than through normal security channels." The information confirmed Elena's suspicions about the deliberate nature of her intelligence limitations, but created new dilemmas about how to respond. Formal accusations against superior officers would require evidence and corroboration that might be difficult to obtain, while informal protests could be dismissed as attempts to deflect blame for professional failure. Elena studied the attack data with growing recognition that her prediction failure had been even more systematically engineered than she had realized. The communications intercepts she had been denied access to contained specific intelligence about insurgent surveillance of the communications array, information that would have redirected her analytical models toward the actual target. "Jessica, the intelligence existed to predict this attack accurately," Elena said, pointing to patterns in the restricted data. "The insurgents conducted electronic reconnaissance for over a week before the assault. Their communication patterns showed clear preparation for a technology-focused attack rather than the conventional assault my models predicted." Palmer examined the data with growing anger at the implications. "They deliberately kept you from seeing intelligence that would have made your prediction accurate, then used your failure to justify removing you from analytical duties. This isn't just professional competition. This is deliberate sabotage of operational effectiveness." The revelation that Elena's failure had been preventable intensified the moral complexity of her situation. Soldiers had been injured in the communications array attack that could have been prevented if her analytical models had access to complete intelligence data. The campaign to discredit her methods had achieved success at the cost of mission effectiveness and personnel safety. Elena's training in applied mathematics included statistical analysis of systematic bias and data manipulation. Applying those skills to her own situation, she recognized clear patterns of deliberate interference designed to produce specific analytical outcomes. The restrictions had been precisely calibrated to degrade her predictive accuracy while maintaining plausible deniability about their purpose. "Jessica, I need to document this systematically before it goes any further," Elena said, her analytical mind engaging with the challenge of proving institutional sabotage. "If they're willing to compromise operational security to discredit mathematical prediction, they'll continue until someone gets killed." Palmer nodded grimly. "What do you need me to do?" Elena outlined a careful investigation plan that would document the systematic nature of her intelligence restrictions while building evidence of their impact on predictive accuracy. The process would require discretion and technical sophistication, but Elena's mathematical background provided tools for demonstrating statistical manipulation that could not be dismissed as coincidence. However, she also recognized that proving sabotage would require confronting senior officers with substantial power to retaliate against anyone who challenged their authority. The campaign against her had succeeded in removing her from predictive duties, but exposing that campaign could escalate the situation into formal disciplinary proceedings with unpredictable outcomes. As Elena began compiling evidence of the systematic campaign against her analytical methods, she faced the realization that her greatest challenge was no longer predicting enemy actions, but navigating the complex dynamics of institutional politics where professional survival often required accepting injustice rather than fighting for truth. The mathematical precision that had made her valuable as a tactical predictor was about to be applied to the more dangerous challenge of proving that her own command structure had deliberately compromised operational effectiveness to protect traditional authority from analytical innovation.
Elena's next moves would determine not only her professional future, but the broader question of whether military institutions could adapt to incorporate new methodologies that challenged established hierarchies, even when those methodologies demonstrably improved mission effectiveness and saved lives. Elena's investigation into the systematic sabotage of her analytical work led to discoveries that extended far beyond her personal persecution. Working in secrecy during off-duty hours, she uncovered a pattern of institutional resistance to innovation that had affected multiple officers and threatened the entire division's operational effectiveness. The breakthrough came when Elena applied network analysis techniques to personnel transfers and career trajectories within the 3rd Armored Division over the previous 18 months. Her mathematical approach revealed clustering patterns that suggested coordinated action rather than random administrative decisions. Officers who had proposed tactical innovations or challenged traditional methodologies had experienced significantly higher rates of negative performance evaluations, disciplinary actions, and undesirable assignments. Captain Thomas Blake, a former Special Operations officer who had advocated for advanced surveillance technologies, had been transferred to administrative duties after his electronic intelligence proposals were rejected. Lieutenant Amanda Foster, who had developed new communication protocols that improved coordination between units, had received poor efficiency ratings that effectively ended her promotion prospects. Major Kevin Wright, who had questioned outdated logistical procedures, had been assigned to a desk job at division headquarters where his operational experience was wasted. The pattern was clear and damning. The 3rd Armored Division had systematically eliminated innovative thinking by punishing officers who challenged established procedures, regardless of the operational benefits their proposals might provide. Elena's persecution was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader campaign to preserve traditional military hierarchy against any form of analytical or technological advancement. Elena's documentation process required extreme discretion as she gathered evidence of institutional corruption that implicated senior officers throughout the division command structure. She developed a sophisticated data collection methodology that avoided official channels while building a comprehensive case that could withstand scrutiny from higher authorities. The most damaging evidence came from personnel records that Captain Palmer accessed through her administrative connections. Palmer had gradually evolved from skeptical colleague to committed ally as she witnessed the systematic destruction of Elena's career despite her proven contributions to mission success. "Elena, look at this pattern," Palmer said during one of their clandestine evening meetings in the base library. "Every officer who has challenged Major Hawkins' authority in the past 2 years has experienced career setbacks within 6 months. The statistical probability of this being coincidental is essentially 0. Elena reviewed the data with growing amazement at the scope of institutional corruption Palmer had uncovered. The evidence suggested that Major Hawkins had been conducting a systematic campaign to eliminate innovative thinking throughout the division, using his influence with Lieutenant Colonel Hayes and other senior officers to destroy careers of anyone who threatened traditional military hierarchies. "Jessica, this goes beyond professional jealousy or resistance to change," Elena observed. "This represents deliberate corruption of military leadership principles for personal and political gain. They're willing to compromise operational effectiveness to maintain their authority." The investigation revealed that Elena's mathematical prediction methods had been particularly threatening because they demonstrated measurable superiority over traditional intelligence analysis.
Her success had provided objective proof that innovative approaches could achieve better results than conventional military wisdom, creating an existential challenge to officers whose authority rested on experience rather than analytical capability. Palmer's research uncovered financial irregularities that suggested additional motivation for the campaign against innovation. Major Hawkins had been receiving consulting fees from defense contractors who supplied traditional intelligence equipment and analysis services. Elena's mathematical methods, which required minimal technology and no external contractors, threatened lucrative relationships that supplemented Hawkins' military income. Elena, this isn't just about military tradition versus innovation. Hawkins has been getting paid to maintain contracts with companies that would lose business if your methods became standard practice. Your success threatens his personal financial interests as well as his professional authority. The revelation transformed Elena's understanding of her persecution from professional competition to criminal corruption. Major Hawkins had been using his military position to protect private financial interests, even when that protection compromised operational effectiveness and endangered soldiers' lives. Elena's mathematical analysis of the contractor relationships revealed systematic inflation of intelligence service costs and degradation of analytical quality to justify continued external support. The division had been paying premium prices for intelligence analysis that Elena's methods had proven inferior to mathematical models developed with minimal resources. The scope of corruption extended beyond individual career destruction to systematic waste of military resources and deliberate degradation of tactical capability. Elena realized she was confronting not just professional jealousy, but organized criminal activity disguised as legitimate military administration. Captain Palmer's investigation also revealed that Elena's supporters within the division had been targeted for subtle retaliation designed to discourage others from defending her methods. Sergeant Santos had been assigned additional duties that prevented her from working closely with Elena. Captain Foster had been transferred to a different unit to eliminate his access to
Elena's analytical work. Even Colonel Thompson had faced pressure from division headquarters to limit Elena's influence within the command structure. The systematic nature of the retaliation campaign demonstrated sophisticated understanding of military bureaucracy and personnel management. Hawkins and his associates had carefully avoided actions that would trigger formal investigations while effectively isolating Elena and eliminating support for her innovative methods. Elena's documentation process revealed the technical sophistication required to prove institutional corruption within military organizations. Her mathematical background provided analytical tools that most officers lacked, enabling her to identify statistical patterns that would be invisible to conventional investigation methods. However, she also recognized that exposing the corruption would require presenting evidence to authorities who might themselves be compromised by the same institutional dynamics she was challenging. The campaign against innovation suggested systemic problems that extended beyond individual officers to broader military culture and organizational structure. The investigation uncovered Elena's most dangerous discovery when she analyzed communication patterns between Major Hawkins and Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. Using techniques similar to those she had applied to insurgent intelligence, Elena identified coordination between division-level officers that suggested the corruption extended throughout the regional command structure. "Jessica, this conspiracy involves flag officers at corps level," Elena said, reviewing encrypted communication logs Palmer had accessed through security channels. The campaign against analytical innovation has been coordinated across multiple divisions to ensure that traditional intelligence methods maintain dominance regardless of their effectiveness. The revelation that Elena's persecution was part of a theater-wide effort to suppress analytical innovation raised the stakes beyond individual career survival to fundamental questions about military effectiveness and institutional integrity. Elena was confronting not just local corruption, but systematic suppression of capabilities that could save lives and achieve mission success. Palmer's expression reflected the gravity of what they had uncovered. "Elena, if we expose this, we're challenging the entire regional command structure.
These officers have the power to destroy our careers and potentially bring criminal charges against us for unauthorized investigation of classified information. Elena understood the risks, but also recognized that remaining silent would enable continued corruption that endangered soldiers and compromised military operations. Her mathematical training had taught her to follow data to logical conclusions, regardless of personal consequences, and the data clearly indicated systematic criminal activity that required exposure. Jessica, we have a moral obligation to report this corruption, even if it destroys our careers, Elena said. Soldiers are dying because innovative methods are being suppressed to protect personal and financial interests. We can't ignore that responsibility because of professional risks. The decision to proceed with exposing the corruption marked Elena's transition from defensive victim to active prosecutor of institutional injustice. Her mathematical skills had revealed criminal activity that extended far beyond her personal persecution, creating an opportunity to protect other officers and improve military effectiveness through systematic reform. Elena began preparing a comprehensive report that would document the corruption while protecting her sources and methods from retaliation. The process required the same analytical precision she had applied to predicting enemy actions, but the stakes were higher and the opponents more dangerous than any insurgent force she had faced. The quiet intelligence officer who had been persecuted for seeing patterns others missed was about to use those same analytical capabilities to expose corruption that threatened the integrity of the entire military command structure. Elena's decision to expose the corruption triggered a carefully orchestrated investigation that would test every analytical skill she had developed while revealing the true extent of institutional resistance to her mathematical methods. The process began when she transmitted her comprehensive evidence package to General Patricia Blackwood at the Pentagon, bypassing the compromised regional command structure entirely. General Blackwood, who had built her career on innovative military technologies and analytical approaches, recognized the significance of Elena's documentation immediately. Within 48 hours of receiving Elena's report, Blackwood had assembled a special investigation team from the Army's Criminal Investigation Division and deployed them to the region under cover of a routine administrative audit. The investigation team, led by Colonel Marcus Kane, arrived at Camp Liberty with orders to conduct a comprehensive review of division intelligence operations while secretly gathering evidence to support Elena's allegations. Kane, a veteran investigator with experience in complex military corruption cases, understood that proving systematic institutional fraud would require meticulous documentation and protection of witnesses. Elena's first meeting with Colonel Kane took place in a secure conference room at division headquarters, ostensibly as part of the routine audit process. Kane's initial questions appeared standard until he shifted to specific inquiries about her analytical methodologies and the circumstances surrounding her suspension from predictive duties. Captain Rodriguez, your mathematical prediction methods have achieved remarkable accuracy rates according to operational records, Kane observed, reviewing documents Elena didn't recognize. Yet you were suspended following a single failed prediction. Can you explain the discrepancy between your overall success and this isolated failure?
Elena had prepared for this moment carefully, organizing her evidence in a logical sequence that would demonstrate the systematic nature of the sabotage without appearing vindictive or unprofessional. Sir, my prediction failure occurred after my access to critical intelligence databases was restricted. Without comprehensive data, mathematical models cannot maintain their accuracy. Kane's expression remained neutral, but Elena detected subtle signs of interest as he pursued specific details about her intelligence restrictions. His questions revealed familiarity with Elena's evidence package and suggested that the investigation was proceeding along lines she had recommended in her documentation. The conversation continued for over 2 hours as Kane methodically reviewed every aspect of Elena's analytical work, the circumstances of her persecution, and the evidence she had gathered regarding systematic corruption within the division. Elena's mathematical training proved invaluable as she presented statistical analysis that demonstrated deliberate interference with her methods.
Captain Rodriguez, your documentation suggests that the resistance to your analytical methods extends beyond normal institutional conservatism to deliberate sabotage of operational effectiveness. These are serious allegations that require substantial evidence to substantiate. Elena provided Kane with encrypted access to her complete evidence archive, including Palmer's research into personnel patterns, financial irregularities, and communication analysis that revealed coordination between corrupt officers. The mathematical precision of her documentation impressed Kane, who had rarely encountered such systematic analytical approaches to investigating military corruption. The investigation accelerated when Kane's team discovered that Major Hawkins had been conducting unauthorized communications with defense contractors during duty hours, violating regulations regarding outside employment and potential conflicts of interest. Phone records obtained through Criminal Investigation Division Authority revealed extensive coordination between Hawkins and company representatives who stood to lose contracts if Elena's methods became standard practice. Captain Palmer, who had been secretly cooperating with Kane's investigation, provided additional evidence that demonstrated the systematic nature of retaliation against innovative officers throughout the division. Her administrative access had allowed documentation of personnel decisions that showed clear patterns of discrimination against officers who challenged traditional methodologies. The breakthrough in the investigation came when Kane's team conducted surveillance of a meeting between Major Hawkins and representatives from Tactical Intelligence Solutions, a contractor that provided analytical services to the division. Electronic surveillance revealed explicit discussion of strategies to discredit Elena's mathematical methods and maintain contractor dependency for intelligence analysis. "We need to demonstrate that mathematical prediction is unreliable under combat conditions," Hawkins was recorded saying during the monitored conversation. "One major failure will justify returning to traditional intelligence methods and maintaining our service contracts." The recording provided direct evidence of criminal conspiracy to defraud the government and compromise operational security for personal financial gain. Kane's investigation had uncovered proof that Elena's persecution was motivated by financial corruption rather than legitimate concerns about her analytical methods. Elena's vindication came during a dramatic confrontation in Colonel Thompson's office when Kane presented his preliminary findings to the division command staff. The meeting had been arranged as a standard audit briefing, but Kane used the opportunity to reveal the scope of corruption his investigation had uncovered. "Gentlemen, our investigation has revealed systematic criminal activity within this division's intelligence operations," Kane announced, his tone carrying the authority of official law enforcement action. Major Hawkins, who had attended the briefing expecting routine administrative discussion, found himself facing direct accusations supported by extensive evidence, including recorded conversations and financial documentation. His attempts to deflect blame and question Kane's authority collapsed when confronted with irrefutable proof of criminal activity. "Major Hawkins, you are hereby relieved of duty pending formal charges related to conspiracy to defraud the government, violation of military ethics regulations, and compromise of operational security," Kane declared. "You will surrender your security clearance and report to Criminal Investigation Division custody immediately." Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who had coordinated the regional aspects of the corruption, was arrested the same day at Corps headquarters based on evidence Elena's investigation had provided. The systematic nature of the conspiracy had made multiple prosecutions inevitable once Kane's team gained access to Elena's comprehensive documentation. Colonel Thompson, who had been manipulated rather than directly involved in the corruption, faced the humiliating realization that his command had been compromised by officers he had trusted. Thompson's failure to protect Elena from systematic persecution reflected poorly on his leadership, but his lack of direct involvement in criminal activity allowed him to retain command while implementing reforms. The vindication Elena experienced during Kane's briefing was complicated by recognition that her persecution had been enabled by institutional dynamics that extended beyond individual
Corruption. The military's resistance to analytical innovation had created conditions where corrupt officers could exploit traditional biases to protect their personal interests. Elena's restoration to full analytical duties came with expanded authority to implement her mathematical methods throughout the regional command structure. General Blackwood had personally intervened to ensure that Elena's capabilities would be properly utilized and protected from future institutional resistance. Captain Rodriguez, your analytical methods will be implemented as standard practice across all divisions in this theater, Thompson announced during Elena's official reinstatement ceremony. Your mathematical prediction capabilities have proven their value despite systematic attempts to discredit them. The ceremony was attended by soldiers from units whose operations had benefited from Elena's predictive analysis, providing visible demonstration of support that contrasted sharply with the isolation she had experienced during her persecution. Sergeant Santos, Captain Foster, and other personnel who had witnessed Elena's contributions stood in formation as recognition of her innovative methods was formally acknowledged. Elena's speech at the reinstatement ceremony reflected both personal vindication and institutional lessons that extended beyond her individual case. Mathematical analysis is not a replacement for military experience and tactical judgment. It is a tool that enhances decision-making by revealing patterns that human intuition might miss. The combination of analytical precision and combat experience provides capabilities superior to either approach alone. The investigation's conclusion established Elena's methods as legitimate military doctrine, while exposing corruption that had threatened operational effectiveness throughout the regional command. Kane's team had documented systematic criminal activity that resulted in multiple prosecutions and comprehensive reform of intelligence operations. Elena's transformation from persecuted analyst to vindicated innovator demonstrated that institutional resistance to change could be overcome when evidence was presented systematically and corruption was exposed through proper channels. Her mathematical approach to both tactical prediction and institutional investigation had proven equally effective in revealing truth despite deliberate attempts at concealment. The quiet intelligence officer who had been mocked for seeing patterns others missed had ultimately used those same analytical capabilities to expose criminal corruption and establish new standards for military intelligence operations. 18 months after her vindication, Lieutenant Colonel Elena Rodriguez stood before the assembled faculty and students of the United States Military Academy at West Point, delivering the keynote address for the inaugural Mathematical Warfare Symposium. The auditorium was packed with military officers, defense analysts, and academic researchers who had come to learn about the revolutionary analytical methods that had transformed modern tactical intelligence. Elena's promotion to lieutenant colonel had come with assignment to the newly created Institute for Predictive Military Analysis at the Pentagon, where she led a team of mathematicians, behavioral psychologists, and intelligence specialists developing advanced analytical tools for military application. The institute represented institutional acknowledgement that mathematical prediction had become essential to modern warfare. Mathematical analysis does not replace human judgment in military operations, Elena explained to her audience, her voice carrying the authority earned through proven success under the most challenging conditions. It enhances human decision-making by revealing patterns and probabilities that intuition alone cannot detect. The combination of analytical precision and military experience creates capabilities superior to either approach alone. The symposium had drawn international attention as military organizations worldwide sought to understand and implement Elena's predictive methodologies. Representatives from NATO allies, academic institutions, and technology companies filled the auditorium, recognizing that Elena's work represented a fundamental shift in how military intelligence operations were conducted. Elena's presentation included case studies from 3 years of operational implementation, demonstrating how mathematical prediction had evolved from experimental technique to standard military practice. Her methods had been successfully applied in counterinsurgency operations, conventional warfare scenarios, and peacekeeping missions across multiple theaters, achieving consistent results that validated the theoretical foundation of her analytical approach. The most compelling evidence of Elena's impact came from casualty statistics that showed dramatic reductions in coalition losses in units that implemented her predictive methods.
Mathematical analysis had enabled forces to anticipate enemy actions with sufficient accuracy to position defensive assets optimally, coordinate response operations effectively, and avoid tactical surprises that historically had caused significant casualties. Predictive analysis saved approximately 2,847 coalition lives over the past 3 years, Elena reported, her statistical precision reflecting the mathematical rigor that characterized all her work. The audience responded with sustained applause that reflected both professional respect for Elena's achievements and recognition that her methods had fundamentally changed military operations. The quiet intelligence officer who had been mocked for seeing patterns others missed had revolutionized how modern militaries understood and responded to enemy threats.
Elena's success had extended beyond immediate tactical applications to broader changes in military education and professional development. The military academy had established mandatory coursework in applied mathematics and statistical analysis for all cadets, recognizing that future officers would operate in environments where analytical skills were as important as traditional military training. The Institute for Predictive Military Analysis had become the military's premier center for developing advanced analytical capabilities, attracting top talent from universities and research institutions worldwide. Elena's leadership had created an environment where mathematical innovation was encouraged and rewarded, representing a complete reversal of the institutional resistance she had initially encountered. Captain Jessica Palmer, now serving as Elena's deputy director at the Institute, had become a leading expert in institutional analysis and organizational behavior. Palmer's research had identified systematic barriers to innovation within military organizations and developed strategies for implementing analytical methods without triggering the kind of resistance Elena had faced. The military's acceptance of mathematical prediction represents more than technological advancement, Palmer explained during her portion of the symposium presentation. It represents cultural evolution within institutions that traditionally valued experience over analysis. This transformation required proving that analytical methods enhanced rather than replaced traditional military virtues. Elena's methods had gained acceptance through demonstrated effectiveness rather than theoretical arguments, providing a model for implementing other innovations within conservative institutional environments. Her experience had shown that overcoming resistance to change required persistent excellence combined with systematic documentation of results that could not be dismissed or ignored. The symposium included presentations from officers who had implemented Elena's methods in various operational contexts, providing evidence that mathematical prediction could be adapted to different threats and environments. Captain Michael Chen described successful application of predictive analysis in urban warfare scenarios, while Major Sarah Williams demonstrated effectiveness in conventional force-on-force operations. The international implications of Elena's work were addressed by Colonel James Anderson, who had coordinated implementation of predictive methods across NATO forces. Anderson's presentation showed how mathematical analysis had improved coordination between allied forces by providing shared analytical frameworks that overcame differences in military culture and operational doctrine. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez's methods have created a common analytical language that enables effective cooperation between military forces with different traditions and approaches, Anderson explained. Mathematical precision transcends cultural barriers and provides an objective foundation for joint operations. Elena's influence extended beyond military applications to broader fields of security analysis and emergency management. Her mathematical approaches had been adapted for predicting terrorist attacks, natural disaster response, and economic security threats, demonstrating the versatility of analytical methods she had developed for military use. The symposium concluded with Elena's vision for future development of mathematical warfare capabilities. Her research team was developing artificial intelligence systems that could process vastly larger data sets and identify patterns too complex for human analysis, potentially revolutionizing military intelligence operations within the next decade.
We are entering an era where mathematical analysis will become as fundamental to military operations as communications and logistics, Elena predicted. Officers who understand analytical methods will possess decisive advantages over those who rely solely on traditional approaches. This represents both opportunity and responsibility for military education and professional development. The personal cost of Elena's journey from persecuted analyst to revolutionary leader was reflected in her closing remarks to the symposium audience. Her experience had demonstrated that institutional change often requires individuals willing to sacrifice personal comfort and professional security to challenge established practices that no longer served their intended purposes. Innovation within military institutions requires courage to challenge traditional authority when evidence suggests better approaches exist, Elena concluded. It requires persistence when facing resistance from those who prefer familiar methods to effective ones. Most importantly, it requires commitment to mission success over personal advancement or institutional convenience. The standing ovation that followed Elena's presentation reflected recognition that her contributions extended beyond tactical analysis to fundamental questions about leadership, innovation, and institutional adaptation in modern military organizations. Her mathematical methods had proven their value through 3 years of operational success, but her example had inspired broader changes in how military institutions approach innovation and change. After the symposium, Elena returned to her office at the Institute for Predictive Military Analysis, where she continued developing next-generation analytical tools while mentoring a new generation of military analysts trained in mathematical methods. Her wall displayed commendations from units whose operations had benefited from predictive analysis, alongside academic recognition for her contributions to military science. The photograph that held the place of honor on Elena's desk showed her with the soldiers of the 3rd Armored Division during her original deployment, a reminder that all her analytical work ultimately served the purpose of protecting those who risked their lives in military service.
Mathematical models and statistical analysis were tools for supporting human beings who face danger in service of their country. Elena's transformation from mocked intelligence officer to respected military innovator had demonstrated that individual excellence could overcome institutional resistance when supported by undeniable evidence and persistent dedication. Her mathematical approach to tactical prediction had not only saved thousands of lives, but had fundamentally changed how modern militaries understood the relationship between analytical thinking and operational effectiveness. The patterns she had seen, where others saw chaos, had become the foundation for new military doctrine that enhanced rather than replaced traditional military virtues. Elena Rodriguez had proven that sometimes the most profound revolutions began with quiet individuals who refused to accept that things had to be done the way they had always been done simply because that was how they had always been done. Her legacy would be measured not only in lives saved and missions accomplished, but in the institutional transformation that made mathematical analysis an integral part of military thinking, ensuring that future conflicts would be fought with every analytical advantage that human intelligence and technological capability could provide. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.